fade out again. Overview. After the True Liao consecration of Ratibor's tomb, the Empire decided they had finally had enough of the Vieg. Their involvement in the bite trade and the rumours of connections with the Druge were the last straw for some. Ratibor's greatest accomplishment was to drive the Vieg out of Temeshwar. Time to do it again. The influential priest Irada von Temeshwar raised a mandate in the League Assembly calling on citizens to lift up the torch of ambition and, by its light, root out the corruption that infests the cities of the League. It has long been known that the Vieg have deep roots in Varushka. They've been driven from the cities before, and they've endured because they've had bolt holes across the north to flee to. This time will be different, however. This time, Velko Perunovich Razoradze has asked the Varushkan Assembly to send Vaclav Mladenovich Kosti to send the Vieg out into the night. This time there will be nowhere to run to. A statement of principle by Valentin von Temeshwar urging League citizens to welcome back those who lost their way with the Vieg and are willing to balance their ledgers has been broadly ignored by the people of the League. The sentiment's fine, but in the light of Ratibor's burning torches, it is seen as just that. Sentiment. The Boyar of Temeshwar would never have accepted someone's word that they were willing to put their life of organised crime behind them. He'd have thrown them on the midden heap with the rest of the night soil. There is little appetite for mercy among those fighting the Vieg. The Vieg are not the only target for those inspired by Ratibor's ambition to drive out his enemies. The situation with monsters in the woods of Metri has grown steadily worse, to the point where it has become intolerable. The discovery that these creatures are more than likely heralds of the Hag Queen was the final straw for many. Ratibor would have never tolerated these monsters infesting his dominion, and neither should anyone else. Pitched battles. Sorenstromen, Travi Modrosti and Drusilla's Obolus are destroyed in the conflict with the Vieg. With support from 2 national assemblies and a score of independent military units, the magistrates and their allies are able to instigate a thorough search for the Vieg. Witnesses are questioned and every lead is followed up. At first, people are reluctant to talk, but as word of the mandate spreads, it slowly becomes clear that the mood is changing. The Vieg have long relied on their reputation for brutal retaliation against anyone who crossed them. They cover their tracks with fear and intimidation. It works whilst people are afraid, but fear is a fickle ally. Once people start to suspect that the Vieg might not be in any position to mete out punishment to those who cross them, their weapon turns on them. When the dam breaks, it unleashes a tidal wave of accusations that flush them out of every nook and cranny in the League. For the most part, the magistrates carry out their raids at dawn, the better to catch out the Vieg sleeping in their beds. But there are not 1, but 2 running battles through the streets of Temeshwar and a bar brawl in Holberg, descending into a street battle between 2 rival gangs of bravos that turns bloody for the best part of a week, as each accuses the other of buying bite from the Vieg. Some of the Vieg try to flee into the vales of Varushka, but they find no succour in the hard north. Vaclav's workers ensured that every Varushkan door is barred against them. The Vieg and those suspected of harbouring them are given a last meal of bread and cheese and then turned out onto the road. The conflict does not pass entirely without consequence. It turns out that the Vieg have been using the Sorenstromen, a forest on the outskirts of Holberg, as a dead drop for a hefty supply of bite that they're smuggling out of the barons. When the magistrates go to arrest them, a fight ensues, and the flame from one of the torches carried by a soldier supporting the raid catches, and the forest quickly catches fire. And though no lives are lost, Sorenstromen is burned to the ground and completely destroyed. The Vieg are not content to go into the labyrinth without fighting back, and the Vareski Stenza are attacked and slaughtered in retaliation after 2 of their number are hanged by the local magistrate. Worse, it soon transpires that a number of legitimate enterprises have been compromised by the Vieg. Several highly reputable businesses are discovered to be fronts used to launder criminal proceeds by the Vieg. They've also discovered to be using herb gardens as front to smuggle bite into the Empire or to find ready customers for it. Trevi Modrosti and 2 other herb gardens in Karsk and Holberg are razed by the Vieg rather than allow the contents to fall into the hands of magistrates. For the most part, these are old and long-abandoned resources, but in at least one case, an imperial sinecure has been shamelessly abused by the Vieg. There's absolutely no evidence that any of the citizens involved knew what was happening, but it seems the Vieg have been using Drusilla's obelisk to smuggle bite into the Empire almost from the day it was built. Like Trevi Madrosti, the obelisk is burned to the ground by the Vieg in an apparent attempt to cover their trail. Many of the raids on the Vieg yield a surprising number of connections between them and the Druj. It appears that the Vieg have been smuggling bite into the Empire from Druj lands for some time now. The ruthless criminals appear to have no qualms about dealing with the Empire's mortal enemies. Morning's Echo says we've sinned. Conjunction. A number of Vieg are fleeing Holberg after robbing a group of sandfishers. The Vieg were spotted joining with Druj by the sandfisher scout Greytooth. The Sentinel Gate will open at 20:30 on Saturday to Elspeth's Well in Utterland. The merchant prince of the Misericord Market is responsible for recovering Misericord's blade from the Vieg. The sandfishers have requested assistance after a number of humans managed to steal Misericord's blade, an item of significant importance to the sandfishers. The group had arranged a meeting with the sandfishers to discuss an ongoing deal, exchanging steel arrows for dried and salted fish. An eagle-eyed sandfisher spotted a Vieg tattoo, but not before the thieves managed to steal Misericord's blade. The Vieg fled, hotly pursued by the vengeful sandfishers. Their scout Greytooth tracked them as far as Elspeth's Well in Utterland, but they gave up the pursuit after the Vieg were observed meeting up with the orcs of the Malum. Misericord's blade was the very first weapon bought by one of the sandfishers when they arrived in Misericord. It served as a symbol of resistance against the Druj, of the promise of what'll happen if the orcs of the Malum return in an attempt to prey on their former subjects. The sandfishers have asked for the merchant print of the Misericord Market to organise the recovery of the blade from the Vieg thieves. They've promised the merchant prince that they'll pay well for its return. There will be stiff resistance from the Vieg and the Druj, a combined force of troops drawn from the Arcad. Given that this is a direct plea to the merchant print of Misericord Market, the responsibility for the conjunction lies with the current merchant prince, Yona Yakovich. We're victims of the night. Conjunction. A group of Vieg are making their last stand near the ruins of Drusilla's obelisk. The Vieg have met up with a group of Druj who've crossed the border into the Barrens. The Sentinel Gate will open at 21:30 on Saturday to Drusilla's farm in the morass. With the obelisk destroyed, Irada von Temeshwar is responsible for dealing with the Vieg. A tip-off alerts the magistrates to the fact that the Vieg have been using Drusilla's obelisk in the morass to smuggle bite and other addictive herbs and substances over the border into the Empire. This trade has allegedly been going on since the obelisk was created, apparently without anyone at Anvil being any the wiser. A magistrate and his entourage were sent to investigate, but they were forced to withdraw when it becomes clear that nobody actually working at the obelisk answers to Lukash anymore, even though he's the citizen who's nominally responsible for the sinecure. The Vieg destroy the obelisk, burning it to the ground to cover their tracks, and then fled the area. Before they were forced to retreat, the magistrates saw the group meeting up with a gang of Druj who crossed the border, apparently looking for escorts as they travelled through the Barrens to the port of Lean in the Malum. The Vieg alone would be easy pickings, but with the Druj protecting them, a significant military force is needed to capture or kill the fleeing criminals. With the obelisk now destroyed, the civil service has assigned responsibility for overseeing the conjunction and dealing with the Vieg to the priest who carried out the mandate in the League, Irada von Temeshwar. Participation. Any citizen who's a member of the Anvil militia or whose military unit took the choice to fight the Vieg is free to roleplay that they have taken part in the conflict with the Vieg. Any member of the Anvil militia or any citizen whose military unit took the opportunity to attack the Vieg is free to roleplay that they took part in the actions against the criminals this season and is free to create their own stories of their escapades, within reason. Stories involving hunting down criminals in Temeshwar, Holberg, any of the territories of Varushka or the surrounding lands are all ideal. The Vieg are ruthless criminals who extort, intimidate, and bully their way to power. They are a crime syndicate. They control the bite trade into the Empire through their extensive contacts with their Druj allies. A story involving a desperate fight against hardened criminals and their Druj allies making a stand together would be appropriate. If your character has a regular income, so mana, money, ingots, measures, herbs, then you're free to roleplay that some or all of these valuables were taken from the Druge allies of the Vieg. Well-gotten gains. The magistrates have confiscated the deeds for 2 prominent businesses in Temeshwar, one in Holberg, and a large forest and a herb garden in Verushka. Any citizen of the League who wishes to exchange their resource for a business can do so without having to pay 2 crowns. As part of their investigation, the magistrates have uncovered a number of businesses that were being used as fronts for Vieg activity. Those that were used purely to sell bite and other illegal substances have closed down, but many were legitimate businesses that were simply used to launder the proceeds of their criminal activities. Where it's clear that the owners were working with the Vieg, these businesses have been confiscated and now are in need of new ownership. To help dispose of the assets, the magistrates have asked that Irada von Temeshwar to deal with the larger, more prominent businesses. There are 3 in total, a rank 4 business and a rank 2 business in Temeshwar, as well as a rank 3 business in Holberg. As the priest who carried out the mandate, the deeds of ownership have been given to Irada. They may deal with them as they see fit at the coming summit. Any citizen who receives one of the deeds can register it with the civil service to take ownership of the business without paying the normal 2 crowns fee. In addition to these businesses, the magistrates have recovered a rank 3 forest and a rank 3 herb garden, both in Cask. These were entirely legitimate businesses, but both were Vieg-owned until the law stepped in. As the priest who carried out the mandate, the deeds of ownership have been given to Vaclav Mladenovich Kosti to deal with at the coming summit. In addition to these prominent resources, there were countless minor businesses that were either owned by the Vieg or being used by their members as fronts for other crimes. With the Vieg definitely out of the picture, any law-abiding citizen could request to take over one of these businesses. As a result, any imperial citizen can choose to request a new business in Holberg or Temeshwar without the normal 2 crown cost. Metri. At the recent solstice, the Empire also resolved to finally settle the problems plaguing the woods of Metri. Ever since the winter 380 YE, something's been stalking the area, attacking anyone that brought violence against another person in the woods. Sometimes they were driven off, but more often, those they attacked were brutally slain, their body rent limb from limb by tooth and claw. The situation has continued to deteriorate for some time, and recently an entire caravan was lost. The situation has come to a head. For the moment, though, there's been no disruption to trade with the Thule, something that a small number of people find a little troubling. The Northern Orcs pass through Metri without any concern, and when queried about it, they appear confused. They have no problems, because they are always sure to propitiate the Mirror of Spite whenever her servants appear. They hadn't mentioned it previously because they just assumed that the presence of the creatures was part of some of the deal the Temeshwari had made with the Queen of the Thrice-Cursed Court, and didn't want to pry. Fabio Costas de Sarvas raised a mandate in the League Synod to urge people to take torches from Ratibor's tomb and burn the creatures out. It looked set to pass easily, but at the last minute, the priests opted to withdraw the judgment. Instead, the Conclave took charge of the situation and asked the Rod and Shield to send a group of battle mages to confront Scathed minions and banish them back to the Winter Realm. The Heralds are a clear threat to the Empire, so dealing with them is firmly in the purview of the Order. Rather than an angry mob, the Empire, perhaps wisely, has elected to send a group of battle-hardened magicians to deal with the servants of the despiteful Mirror. A disturbing encounter. Metri has lost the haunted quality, and the disruption has ended for now. The Grand Enchantrix will resume her work in the future if she is not dealt with. The first creatures encountered in the woods of Metri proved to be no match for the war witches, runesmiths and battle mages that march beneath the banner of the Rod and Shield. Rabid, feral beasts charging desperately to attack with claws and teeth may pose a terrible threat to merchants and their caravan guards, but they're no match at all for a coordinated attack by the Empire's finest heroes. The magicians have to be careful not to allow the bear-like monsters to get close, but it's clear these beasts lack the intelligence needed to defeat an enemy who can paralyse them with a single touch. Working systematically, the Rod and Shield sweep the forests, slaughtering the Hag Queen's beasts one by one until none remain. The magicians are understandably jubilant at this victory. Their success has ensured that Metri is no longer haunted and the disruption to trade and commerce in the area is ended. However, it soon becomes clear that these monsters are simply guards of some kind to protect the real horrors. The day after the last of the beasts are slain, a group of magicians are attacked by 3 servants of the despiteful mirror. These vile creatures, or spites, are not armed with teeth and claws, but with spells and weapons, ordering the Empire to withdraw in the name of the Grand Enchantrix of Metri. They unleash a constant stream of insults and vile epithets at the magicians as they heckle them constantly. Rather than engage, the magicians fell back, judging it better to return with intelligence about this new enemy than risk the unknown. The Rod and Shield ascertain that this Grand Enchantrix is the one who sired or unleashed the twisted beasts that were haunting the woods and attacking the caravans. The Order have definitely dealt with these monsters and ended the threat that they posed, but if the Herald created or summoned these monsters, she can almost certainly rebuild her forces given time. That could take a while, but even so, it would be better to deal with the Enchantrix as soon as possible so that the Order's work is not undone. A conjunction to Agnieszka's Grove is discovered as part of these preparations. It offers by far the best chance to deal with this powerful herald and her supporters. Waiting for so long. Conjunction. Only the Grand Enchantrix and their spites remain active in Metri. The Sentinel Gate will open at 21:15 on Friday to Agnieszka's Grove in Metri. The Grand Master of the Rod and Shield is responsible for clearing the last heralds of Scathe from Metri. Though the actions of the Rod and Shield have cleared the twisted beasts from the dark woods of Metri, a group of heralds in service to the Hag Queen yet remain. The actions of the Rod and Shield has pushed the Grand Enchantrix and her retinue of spites to a small grove of trees, where they can be dealt with once and for all. Great care should be taken, however. This band of monsters and malefactors possesses weapons and magic of their own, including baneful powers that have left a swath of cursed bishops and Kikabay in their wake. Given that this has come about due to the actions of the Rod and Shield, it is the responsibility of the Grand Master of the Rod and Shield, Sakari Nightscale, to deal with the threat. Participation. Any member of the Rod and Shield is free to roleplay that some or all of the regular income they received this season has come from valuables recovered from the monsters that haunted the woods of Metri. Any member of the Rod and Shield is free to roleplay that they took part in the actions of the Order over the past season in Temeshwar, and is free to create their own stories of their escapades within reason. A story involving a desperate fight against a feral beast where you were close to death, but for the aid of your allies or your magical might, or a close call run-in with the dangerous spite heralds of Scathe, though not the Grand Enchantrix, would be appropriate. If your character has regular income, that is to say mana, money, ingots, measures or herbs, then you are free to roleplay that some or all of these valuables were taken from the monsters that you've been clearing out of Temeshwar.